when folks want to tell you to run schools like a business, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Right. Or they do know what they're talking about and they stand to gain financially.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We're going to continue talking about the push to privatize public schools as long as it's relevant in Alabama and nationally. And there's this huge trend nationally to privatize public schools, and they're doing it behind this facade of like wokeness or whatever, you know, this meaningless kind of thing. And one of the things that we try to do when we talk about this issue is and one of the things that we want to point out is that none of the advocates ever actually show you proof cases, right? And listen for it. Listen for it and look for it when you're reading, and listen for it when you're listening to these folks. They never tell you any statistics or even honestly any like anecdotes about how quote unquote school choice works. They'll give you these fluffy hypothetical stuff. Theoretically, maybe somebody's going to get a better education, theoretically. They never ever give you any data to prove that. And they very rarely give you an anecdote. Occasionally, they might give you an anecdote, but that's very rare. And so listen for that. Because the school choice, the school vouchers, school privatization, it has been done. It has been done. They have enacted full-scale voucher programs in states across the country. And so theoretically, if they really wanted to strengthen their case, if their case was actually rock solid, they would be coming out with all of this information about look at how much student performance has increased with the implementation of a voucher program. And one of the arguments that they say is that, competition is going to make the failing public schools even better. Well, if that was the case, then show us the data. Show us that's the case. Prove it to us, because we've done the thing. So prove it to us. And they don't, because it's not real. It doesn't actually benefit students. It doesn't actually benefit the failing, quote unquote, public schools. And the only people that it benefits are the wealthy people who get subsidies for private schools that their kids were already attending, and the CEOs of these private schools. But we have this, but there's also, the anecdotal data. And the anecdotal data is, it's important and it's relevant. And there is an anecdotal case out of Montgomery of just what happens when you have an unaccountable charter school. And so, Adam, talk to us about this charter school in Montgomery.
Yeah, this is the infamous Lead Academy. And this is just the latest scandal in a series of scandals, frankly, from this charter school in Montgomery. And in this case, we've got some, let's say, mismanagement. It would be one way of phrasing it. The bottom line is that this Montgomery Charter School Lead Academy is going to have to repay $1.9 million to the feds. But it doesn't have the money, they say. And that's according to a recent article by Tricia Crane with AO.com, published on March 17th. So what happened is that there was an audit, and an audit found that the school did not accurately track more than 600,000 meals served in 2021 and 2022. In 2022, the U.S. Department of Agriculture received an anonymous complaint alleging that Crave Cafeteria Solutions, the vendor supplying meals at Lead Academy, inflated the number of children and meals served during the 2021-22 school year. I'm going to pause here and just say, you will hear folks, particularly supporters of charter schools, say that, well, these are public charter schools, they're public schools, they're not for profit, because in Alabama, at least, they are public charter schools. But there are so many ways to put public dollars in private hands. And this is a prime example, right? At a normal school, the school feeds its own kids. Employees of the school system prepare the food and serve the food. And the school system central office purchase the food. In a charter school, you can contract with a vendor to handle this for you. And common sense dictates there's room for malfeasance. So back to the article. After this audit and after the complaint, the school now has to find a way to repay the USDA nearly $2 million. Paul Morin, who serves on the Alabama Public Charter School Commission, which oversees LEAD and other state charter schools, called the audit and questions about the school's leadership a major issue at a recent meeting. The commission recently denied the school's request to expand ninth grade enrollment. Now, Lead Academy Board President Charlotte Meadows, a former state legislator, frankly, one of the few on a short list of people, if you had to identify who is behind school choice and school reform and privatization in the state of Alabama, Charlotte Meadows is going to be on the short list there. She's at the top. So she is actually the president of this scandalous charter school and formerly served in the legislature. She claims that the school doesn't have any money connected to the meals on hand because the money was used to pay the vendor, Crave. And in statements to AL.com and in their lawsuits, school and Crave cafeteria officials each claim the other party was responsible for properly counting the meals, right? So now they're just pointing fingers and placing blame. Meadows claimed that Crave employees did not follow proper procedures or keep proper records. She also said the pandemic school year plus shifting federal guidance caused miscommunication. Lead Academy has sued Crave for $2 million, which is the amount owed plus interest. The school claimed the company breached its contract and defrauded the school by inflating the number of school meals it could claim. In January, a judge issued a default judgment and ordered Crave to repay the money. Meadows said Lead Academy is pursuing all legal means to collect the taxpayers' money from Crave so it can return it to the USDA. But Brian Pleasant, who owns Crave, refuted her claims. He said to AL.com that the school staff were responsible for properly counting and claiming the number of the number of students and meals served. So Crave, led by Pleasant, filed an appeal in February, and that's still ongoing. Jason Swan with the State Department of Education said the department is working with Lead Academy officials on next steps. They gave the school until September 2027 to repay the full amount, according to Meadows, which is interesting. The Alabama Board of Education Vice President Wayne Reynolds, who's from Athens, said in an email to state board members Friday that the State Department should obtain approval from the state board before moving forward with any decisions about the repayment plan. Now, Lead Academy, as I mentioned, this isn't their first scandal. They've been involved in multiple lawsuits. They had issues even getting open. They should have never been allowed to open, frankly. But I'm sure the fact that, they were very well connected may have helped them get their application through. At one point, Montgomery County Schools had to step in and provide meal services for the school.
Wow.
So, yeah, that had to sting a little bit, right? You're forced to step in and help this school that's siphoning funding and siphoning students from your district. And then they turn around and at least somebody is inflating it, right? That is a very easy way to commit fraud inside the school system, is that you claim you're serving more meals than you really are. And I heard plenty of scuttlebutt in Huntsville over the years representing employees there. I never Never had any concrete proof. Never could bust them 100%, but there were allegations. So this is not necessarily unique, but charter schools have more room for fraud, and Lead Academy in particular has quite the scandalous reputation. And so I'll also point you to an article by Josh Moon in the Alabama Political Reporter. What is school choice? Lead Academy is the perfect example. And so, much like Jacob's introduction, he sort of ties this example of Lead Academy to the broader issue of so-called school choice, because he points out that this is the most common outcome. Mismanagement, alleged fraud, allegations of special needs children being pushed away, scandal after scandal, and perhaps most importantly, educational outcomes that are typically worse overall for students. So, Lead Academy, there's a lot more we could go into there, frankly, but it's if you're interested in like what has the charter school movement looked like in Alabama, check out Lead Academy. That's going to give you a good idea of the sort of issues that we're seeing, and some of the fraud, some of the mismanagement, some of the segregation. And by segregation, I don't mean just on race, but ability, class. There's a lot of disturbing things that happen in these charter schools, and the Network for Public Education has been really on top of this from the federal level. They release reports nearly every year on fraud in the federal charter school system. We're talking millions of dollars of fraud. Straight up fraud, not just like, maybe it's not the best use of money. No, we're talking legitimately fraud.
Right.
Millions of dollars has come from taxpayer money. Back in 2019, they had a report showing the federal government had lost $1 billion to charter school waste and fraud. That was 2019, and that was just what the federal government had lost. It's disturbing. And I know from my experience in Huntsville City Schools, whenever you deal with vendors, you always have risk of corruption. You have risk of misallocation of funds and mismanagement of funds. And then you have the battles over the contract renewals, which can often end in lawsuits. I remember a few years back, Huntsville City Schools wanted to swap to a different vendor for their supply of temp labor, right? And they disqualified one of the vendors because they had been so awful. Then they ended up in court over it. Then there was the whole situation with Pinnacle, which was the privatized alternative school in Huntsville. And it just so happened the CEO of Pinnacle happened to be dating the superintendent of Huntsville City Schools at the time. And that whole thing blew up into competing lawsuits where each side was blaming the other. It's just messy. And that is why when folks want to tell you to run schools like a business, they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Right.
Or they do know what they're talking about and they stand to gain financially.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.